Oh, look, I disagree principally because a lot of farmers in my region don't support this policy. In fact, the AgForce Queensland, the Queensland member of the NFF, does not support the NFF's net zero emissions policy. And, you know, I think that's largely based on the fact that farmers have got a raw deal from climate agreements in the past. Farmers in my region here in Central Queensland have seen so much farmland taken away from them, property rights stripped from them, all with the intent of meeting our Kyoto targets. We wouldn't have met those targets but for the restrictions placed on land clearing over the last 20 years. And that was to reduce our emissions by 5%. Now we're saying, well, let's reduce it by the other 95%. And what's going to happen next? Are we going to have more land turned to trees? Because that's one of the options on the table. We just put trees on land and take away that farming life. If the farmers go in my region, then the tyre shop doesn't get the business, the petrol station doesn't get people in them, and the whole community, before you know it, collapses. And so I don't think this is a good deal at all, particularly in a context where other countries are not doing anything and not meeting their targets. Why would we?
What about the argument where, you know, it's not just Farmers Federation, the Meat and Livestock Council also supporting net zero, but basically the point is it's not just about planting trees, it's about better grazing techniques and carbon sequestration in soil. The Minister Littleproud says that the budget in May is looking at ways that farmers, he's quoted in the AFR today, I should mention, he's saying where farmers can be paid by corporates or others looking to offset their own emissions or be rewarded directly for improved land management. Why shouldn't farmers benefit? Because as you say, they've had to do the heavy lifting previously. Why shouldn't they be in a position to cash in now?
Well, I think farmers, and I want to see farmers produce food, not indulgences. You know, I want to see our nation's farmers produce a product that people want to buy because it fills their tummy, tastes good, and lets them have a higher standard of living. Not because they're trying to produce a good that makes rich city people feel be able to sleep at night because of their climate guilt. I don't want that to be the future for our nation's farmers. And keep in mind, when they do a lot of these things, like the trees, you know, converting farmland to trees, it takes away the jobs. There's no jobs in the sugar mill or jobs in harvesting the crop because trees just sit there and grow. So that's a big change. We've seen that happen in our own local communities. The other point here is none of this is costless, right? None of it, it all costs money. It costs money to sequester carbon in your soil. Yes, you get a benefit in productivity, but if the benefit paid off the cost, people would be doing it now. Our nation's farmers aren't stupid. If there were $50 notes on the ground, they'd be picking them up now. And so it costs money. And yet we can all sit here and say there's a promise of government supporting farmers doing this. But we all know that you'll get a promise one day from a government, then 10 years' time it'll be taken away. And who will be left with the bill? But those of us in the farming communities that live in regional Australia. I'm the beef capital of this country here.
David Littleproud argues that beef producers, for example, can benefit by improving the biodiversity of their land and then charge a premium as well by stamping their meat with a biodiversity seal. Isn't that a benefit for farmers as well that they can tap into?
Yeah, well, look, and that's great. They can do that now. There's no need for government to sign up an international agreement for that to happen. Good luck to them. I mean, I'm not against, you know, rich people assuaging their moral guilt by paying farmers to do certain things. If that's what people want to do with their money, good luck to them. They can do that. There's no need, though, for a government policy and laws. What I'm against is us coming along with the heavy hand of government, adding more red tape, more regulation, more restrictions to people who just want to farm and provide for their family. I'm sick of it. We've had way too much red tape. We need, post this coronavirus, to remove regulation, to free up our economy, to let people produce and grow and develop their own businesses without unwanted restrictions. And so that's where I'm in the legislative game here. What I'm against is more...
Sure, but you said they should already do it. But they are doing it, aren't they? They are doing it through the Emissions Reduction Fund. Land use and farmers are already benefiting right as we speak now.
Well, as I say, I don't think that's a sustainable way to go to net zero. I mean, to go, as I say, we've had all of these restrictions imposed on farming just to meet a 5% reduction. To go the next step and go to net zero, we'd need enormous amounts of land converted to solar, to wind, to trees, and that would destroy so much farming in this country. So this is not a binary choice. I mean, people can continue to do those things that you've mentioned, and get the green tick on their product. Got nothing against that. People do that every day of the week. They've done it for years. Good luck to them. The issue here is, do we sign up to a process where we will slowly but surely shut down large parts of the Australian economy and cost thousands of people their jobs?
Do you accept, though, that you are an outlier on this? If you've got the Business Council of Australia, the Farmers Federation, Meat and Livestock, all the states and territories, our major strategic allies, our trading partners, they're all committing to that goal. Why are you right and they're all wrong?
Well, first of all, we stood at the last election and were elected on a policy platform to oppose net zero emissions. Our climate emissions reduction minister, Angus Taylor, came out and called the net zero target that the Labor Party took to the election as absurd and too costly for the country. That's the mandate and policy platform that we were elected on less than 2 years ago. And we've had that, that was supported by the Australian people. So I'm happy to take on board the views of the Business Council or the NFF or other of these big bodies. But I actually am here to represent the people of Australia, and I don't think the people of Australia want us to handicap our own productive industries like farming or mining or take away any possibility of bringing manufacturing jobs back to this country. That's not what the people voted for less than 2 years ago, and I'm staying true to those people who are trying to battle in their lives, just have a job and see this country grow and prosper.
Don't you also have to be, able to shift where there is a change internationally, for example, with trade agreements, negotiations underway with the EU and the UK? They're going to want strong action if they're going to sign on to free trade deals. You've got Biden, the Biden administration warning as well of carbon tariffs. It could hit the bottom line, not to mention our big customers in Japan, Korea, among others, committing to net zero. Don't you accept that there is an international component here? You might say, look, these are just international agreements, but it has a flow-on effect to where we can sell our produce.
I don't think we should be bullied into changing our policy. And look, if we wanted to play that game, a French court ruled the other day that France is not meeting its commitments under the Paris Agreement, signed in Paris. And France is not meeting its commitments there. Canada and New Zealand did not meet its Kyoto targets that came due last year. This is ridiculous, and I'm not going to take lectures from other countries that have not met their targets under climate change agreements. When we did meet our Kyoto targets, and are now making empty promises about what they're going to do in 30 or 40 years. I think we should stand up to that and not be bullied or threatened into changing our own policy and costing our own economy and people their jobs because of decisions made in other countries. I mean, I do hear the argument put that because Joe Biden was elected in America, suddenly we should change our policy. I mean, there was a lot of controversy about the US election, allegations of dead people voting, people voting from other states. But I did not hear any allegations that Australian people got a vote in the US election. None of us got a vote. So why should we change our policy because of an election in another country?
It's not so much about, you reference bullying, but isn't it about the demand? If our customers are not going to buy our produce or our resources, our energy in years to come, shouldn't we?
I don't know. It sounds like. Well, hang on.
Shouldn't we change our export profile?
Well, aren't you saying here that these countries are telling us reduce your carbon emissions, or we're gonna punch you, right? We're gonna slap a big tax on you. That's bullying. Give us your lunch money, or we're going to punch you in the face. That's bullying. That's what they're doing. That's what they're trying to do. And as I say, I don't think they've got any moral high ground to make those arguments, given many of those countries are not meeting existing targets, let alone the ones in the future. And if we want to play that game here, well, hang on. How come we've let Europe continue to subsidise their farmers to the tune of billions of dollars a year in contravention, certainly, of the spirit of trade agreements, costing poor countries massive amounts of money? Let's have a tax on that. Let's get together with the world and make sure and tell Europe they should not be keeping unsustainable farming production in train, because it suppresses world prices and particularly costs poor countries billions and billions of dollars a year. So I think on the international stage we have a very, very strong case to make here, because we do meet our commitments. We do have an internationally free trading environment compared to any other country. And to sit back and try and take lectures from other countries because of that, I think would be a gross misjudgment. We should stand up for ourselves and have pride on what we've achieved and that we do what we say.
We spoke about the political shift internationally. What about the shift in capital? BlackRock, which has $8.67 trillion US dollars under management, the chief executive, Larry Fink, has issued a warning to 1,000 chief executives, carbon-intensive companies, saying, lift your game or we'll dump investments in your companies. What about the shift in global capital?
Yeah, look, I think you mentioned a political shift too. There has been a major political shift around the world, particularly in the Western world. There are those, I'd say, like myself, who was trying to stand up for working people who just want a job and get on with their lives and support their communities, and those who are listening to a Pied Piper tune of the elites and those the moneyed classes who are trying to take the world down a different path. And I think ultimately, in a democracy like ourselves, that the people will win. That the people should be listened to, not an investment banker in BlackRock. I don't know, I've never met this guy, good luck to him. But I think we should make sure that we make decisions in the interests of our people, of Australian average people who struggle to pay their bills, who often work in insecure environments. I mean, there is a real shift happening across the world, and the coronavirus has highlighted that. You've had a lot of people do okay over the last year, working from home on their laptops, the so-called laptop class, done well and can think about these more visionary and less tangible issues. And then there are those in my communities and regional areas that work in factories, in mines, in shops, that have quite insecure jobs and are a little bit concerned about these radical policies where we'll reduce our own emissions in Western countries and then send all our production overseas to countries like China, who will do nothing to reduce their own emissions, but just take and steal our jobs. Now, that won't come, I think it was Larry Fink, was it? I don't know his name, but that won't come at much cost to Mr. Fink. But it will be a massive impost on those who are left behind in our communities, and that's why I'm fighting against this madness. Because there's no way China is. But you can't. It just brought online.
You said you're going to cross
the floor. It brought online over 30. So you talk about what BlackRock's doing. Let's talk about what the Chinese Communist Party's doing. They brought online more than 30 gigawatts of coal-fired power last year, more than we have in this whole country. And then they, on the other side of their mouth, say they're going to sign up to net zero by 2060. We should wake up and smell the coffee.
Well, you said you're going to fight against the committing to this target. You're limited, though, aren't you? Because I think in an interview over the last day or so, you said you'd cross the floor, but there's actually not legislation required. So how else do you make your case? Or is this just posturing?
Well, look, of course, if we're going to get to net zero and meet it in any tangible way, there'll of course have to be laws passed, and I'm committed to being against this and voting against any policies to pursue the shutdown of production in this country and productive opportunities. Look, if it ends up being, as you're, I suppose, suggesting there, just lip service that we pay to an international agreement, say, yeah, sure, we'll sign up to net zero emissions, but then do nothing to try and progress it. Well, okay, I suppose I can live with that eventually. Every other country seems to do that. That's not what's going to happen, though, because, as I say, we actually do what we say, and I'm sure there will be legislative attempts. I also think we need to make sure we continue to pursue and support, regardless of what we commit to at any international level, the development of our manufacturing industry, the importance to invest in reliable power like coal-fired power. I mean, as I mentioned, China's building more than 100 coal-fired power stations while signing up to a net zero commission.
But where that legislation is, you'll cross the floor.
And so, yeah, absolutely, I'm dead set against this
on every
radical commitment. Well, look, I can't forecast votes on stuff that I don't have in front of me. But if you're asking a flat-out question, yep, I'd vote against net zero emissions because it would cost hundreds of thousands of Australian jobs. And it would make our country poorer.
Just finally, my colleague Andrew Clennell this afternoon is reporting that the Nationals senators that you and Bridget McKenzie and others meet in separate to the Nationals party room. It's described by one MP as your own clique. Is that right? Have you been meeting outside and running your own agendas separate to the National Party room?
Yeah, we meet. We do meet. As long as I've been a senator, which has only been for 6.5 years, the National Senate team has met every week that we sit in Canberra. We've continued to meet through the last year. Look, I suppose what's changed though in the Senate is for the last year, there have not been any members of the National Senate team in the ministry or the executive, with Bridget and I leaving. And that's no doubt freed us up, because when you're in the executive, you can't cross the floor, or to do so, you lose your ministry. Whereas we don't have that consequence anymore. And I think that has allowed us to perhaps more forcefully represent and fight for the interests of regional Australia. We banded together to make sure we got a good outcome for live cattle producers in the class action decision there last year. And we'll continue to fight very hard for the interests of regional Australia. We've got a great team, and Bridget and Perrin and Susan and Sam. And I'm the only bloke there, but I'm pushing hard for some male quotas in our National Senate team, Kieran. It's a little bit unbalanced at the moment.